Last week, we introduced you to Trevor, a survivor of shaken baby syndrome, and his mother, who was accused of causing his injuries. Trevor's chronic health issues were all preventable, but when stress levels rise, caring for a crying baby can become a challenge. Reporter Jacqueline Shepard finds out how caregivers can stop this deadly condition before it starts.
In the United States, each year an estimated 1,200 to 1,400 children are violently shaken, causing severe injury or even death. The effects of shaking a baby can lead to a diagnosis of shaken baby syndrome.
It's like having gelatin, like your brain is gelatin and then your skull, and you're just crashing back and forth. So the impact on both sides, and that's what caused my seizures and the hemorrhaging and everything and the internal bleeding in my brain.
Shaken baby syndrome is actually a constellation of symptoms that together create a diagnosis of shaken baby syndrome, because typically when a baby is violently shaken, there are no external injuries. There's no blood dripping from the head. There's no, physical broken bones.
But the internal injuries can be devastating. The most common injuries include bleeding on the brain, massive brain swelling, and bleeding inside the eye. Victims usually range from infant to 2 years old and are most often shaken by a parent or guardian who loses control.
It turned everything inside out for me, because I know in my heart that, I love Trevor more than anything. And there's, they might try to kind of manipulate you into answering questions that might make you want to feel like, well, God, maybe I did do something, but you didn't in your heart.
During the trial, medical evidence indicated Trevor's injuries happened while in the care of a licensed child care professional. Although Trevor's parents were exonerated, charges were never filed against the child care provider.
We authored a law, Senate Bill 819 in 2001, that requires that when a court has exonerated the parents when death or injury occurs in a licensed daycare facility, that they reopen the investigation based on the evidence.
25% of all children who suffer shaken baby syndrome will die, and almost all survivors will face medical challenges well into adulthood. For Trevor, his primary issue is pain.
I could have been a fine boy. Like, I probably wouldn't have had the neck pain that I have and the knee pain that I have now.
Trevor was shaken when he was just 4 months old, causing blindness in his right eye. He missed 56 days of school last year due to pain and hospitalization. Now he's in physical therapy for chronic pain, muscle spasms, and misalignment of his extremities.
Your spine is made up of different vertebrae or bones, so they're one stacked, one on top of the other. Let's say because of that initial injury, that one is a little bit more loose. Okay, so are you a little bit more prone to injury? Probably. Like if the core needs a little bit more strengthening, if his hips need a little bit more strengthening. Because if there's a missing link somewhere, one of the joints is going to take the brunt of the damage.
The degree of brain damage depends on the amount and duration of the shaking. Survivors are left with handicaps ranging from mild learning disorders to blindness and paralysis.
All of them except one were really badly suffered from it. Like, they are in a wheelchair, have to eat through a tube and drink through a tube that goes in their stomach.
Shaken baby syndrome is preventable and frequently occurs when a frustrated caregiver loses control with a crying baby.
I want them to know that it's something that is very dangerous, and a lot of teenagers and young people are having babies, and at that level and age they tend to get more frustrated and a lot easier, and they're not mature enough yet for a baby.
Now that Trevor is older and understands what happened when he was just 4 months old, he and his mother are on a mission to educate others.
I started a meetup group where we're trying to reach out to find other shaken baby families so that we can kind of maybe have a little summer get-together or something, so we can meet other families, share our resources. He's using this as a tool to kind of broaden his horizon. He loves speaking in public, he loves being in front of a camera, he loves meeting other people, and it gives him a real sense and a real lift of his self-esteem.
For Torrance City Cable, I'm Jacqueline Shepard.
For online training and tools on how to prevent shaken baby syndrome, go to don'tshake.org. Coming up, we'll bring you back to Kansas City for the run-up to the All-America City Award competition.
Now, here's your 5-day forecast. It's a mysterious syndrome that sometimes leads to death in infants, and researchers are just starting to understand its outcome. Reporter Jacqueline Shepard explains.
Good. Squeeze here every time.
School is out for summer, but Trevor Bice is still hard at work making sure he's ready to play football and basketball next season.
My main thing is I want to give him every opportunity. You know, he's young, he's active, and the last thing any kid wants to do is stop.
Trevor's training is not what you would expect. An injury to his spine causes him to endure constant pain and increases the chances of new injury.
I could have been a fine boy. Like, I probably wouldn't have had the neck pain that I have and the knee pain that I have.
Trevor's injuries are more than a decade old, but December 2nd, 1999 is a day his mother will never forget.
When I left for the day to go pick Trevor up from daycare, as I arrived in front of the home, there was an ambulance out front. And as I was approaching the porch, with great worry, I heard, "Oh, there she is now." So I was immediately alarmed that, something had happened to my son.
After finding her son unconscious at the daycare center, he was rushed to Torrance Memorial Hospital. Later, he was transferred to Miller's Children's Hospital in Long Beach, where she finally learned what happened to her son.
About 3 in the morning, we were told that he had been violently abused, that he had been violently shaken, and he had massive hemorrhaging in the brain, retinal hemorrhaging, and he was in and out of consciousness and seizure activity.
Trevor was suffering from shaken baby syndrome. He was in intensive care for 10 days, underwent brain surgery, and was taken from his mother. During the next 4 months, Trevor's parents fought child abuse charges and to regain custody of their son.
What came out in the trial was that more likely than not, he incurred the injury about 2 hours prior to the onset of the symptoms. So almost with a medical certainty, but not 100%, we're able to determine that the cause of the injury, the shaken baby, occurred while in the care of the daycare provider.
The charges were eventually dropped, but Trevor's recovery was just beginning.
When it comes to shaken baby syndrome, not only is the brain shaken up, but the electrical activity in the brain is also shaken, and that is indelible throughout the years. And so it will have symptoms like extreme anxiety, post-traumatic stress, difficulty sleeping.
Once a week, wires connect Trevor to his home laptop while his doctor monitors his brain activity remotely.
Once it is able to identify where he has, let's say, too much alpha because of the anxiety, or too much theta because of the sleep deprivation, it will feed that information back to the brain, not through the wires, but through the auditory system. So he'll be listening to music, and he will hear in the music a series of skips, scratches, and pauses. And they're not random, they're in a particular sequence. And to him it sounds like a scratched up CD, but to his brain catches on very quickly that this is a direct feedback from how it's been firing just an instant before. And the brain is so self-intelligent that it will take that information and literally rebalance itself.
And it seems to be working. Trevor was once taking 5 prescriptions for anxiety and sleep deprivation. His treatment is almost complete and he's free of the medication, leaving him more time to focus on his mission of sharing his story.
I'm reaching out to all the other people and shaken babies that are more injured and have been more affected by it. And I'm reaching out to the people who don't know about it and to make sure don't do this. They don't really understand it, so it's really hard for me to reach out the word to young people, but that's basically what I need to reach out to. Because a lot of people are like 12 or 13 and babysitting. And that's one of the big levels of how it can happen.
It's been 11 years since Trevor was violently shaken. Since then, he's met countless other children who face the same trauma, and he says they remind him how lucky he really is.
They are in a wheelchair, have to eat through a tube and drink through a tube that goes in their stomach and everything. And there was only one other person that was like me, but he was 4. It's one of those things where I just feel like God made me lucky one of the few.
Trevor will undergo some level of therapy well into adulthood, but he's thankful that his treatment allows him to have some fun just being a kid. For Torrance City Cable, I'm Jacqueline Shepard.
Thank you, Jacqueline. And next week we'll have more on the signs and dangers of shaken baby syndrome. Coming up, we'll tell you how to register for what's sure to be a memorable